Hello world, hello listeners, welcome to the PG.biz podcast. And yes, this week, once again, my co-host Brian, he is taking care of and hosting an amazing show in Scotland. So we send you our greetings, Brian, and you've done an amazing job. And another way to do an amazing job is what we're going to be touching on today, because as we speed through Q4 and look to 2024, of course, devs and studios are staring down the barrel of some incredible challenges. But there's also massive opportunity, because there's always an upside to everything. And look at it as an opportunity to take some time to think about joining up, acquisition, and engagement. And this is exactly the approach that's baked into the DNA of our guest today. And his motto is very simple: make every app as great as it can be. His customers range from Virgin Media to King, and he's here today to share his pick of growth strategies that you can harness in Q4 to really hit the ground running in Q1 of 2024. We welcome Mike Rhodes, founder and CEO of ConsultMyApp. Mike, great to have you today. Really a pleasure.
Hey, hello. Very lovely to be here. I'm very excited, and hopefully going to provide a few little interesting nuggets throughout the session today. So thank you very much for having me on, Peggy.
Well, I happen to have insight into the talk track as the host. And yes, there are some very interesting nuggets. But I want to start with you, Mike, because it's not often that someone is dedicated to advancing the entire app sector. So it makes it sound to me that it's not just a huge commitment to make every app and game amazing, but it sounds like something you would promise yourself after having some fairly interesting, perhaps tough life lessons. What has sparked your passion here, making you say, yes, we have to help apps advance? Somewhere there was a roadblock.
Yeah, it's interesting. It actually predates my time in the app industry, because I'm getting on these days. It goes back to many years ago when I was a sort of fresh graduate working in consultancy. I've always been in data. I'm a computer science grad. So, I've always been in tech development, data, and sort of I honed those skills in towards how to make these cool data and analytical models and regression models and feed forward neural networks, things like that, which are really cool to me, how to make them applicable in business. And I've always thought that the essential part of my job and role there was to, I guess, democratise, that's a word I'll use a lot, that some of the real sort of highbrow techie data stuff to, wider audiences that don't necessarily understand the details, but to actually convey the value of what those, models and data and analytics actually could provide to them. So basically articulating the real business use for that tech and data and sort of bridging the gap between the two. Fast forwarding on to when I joined a company called Other Levels. They were a customer engagement platform. They were very good back in the day. They were sort of competing with Airship, and it was built out to be an Airship killer. And then I joined a company called Swerve, similar sort of customer engagement platform. I came across a lot of teams in businesses that they knew exactly what they were doing with digital and web, and they were very, very clever. But didn't necessarily know how to translate what they knew in those areas into mobile. So I sort of looked at that, and I worked in the industry for a number of years for these software vendors, and thought there's probably a space for this sort of knowledge outside of these software vendors, actually as an independent agency or consultancy, and to sort of educate and empower all of these people with to use and leverage the technology and the super advanced stuff like ASO and sort of TikTok, other media channels, how to leverage all of this stuff to make their apps really good, because fundamentally their apps were pretty good. They built a solid product with a solid value proposition. They just didn't know how to leverage and pull these levers to, improve both the acquisition and the sort of engagement pieces to drive sustainable, profitable, scalable growth. And that's really where I sort of came in with CMA. And CMA was sort of created on that premise about 7 years ago. So very big ambition just from one person. That's really what I've always had at the back of my mind, is not to patronize. Our job is to educate people and keep our fingers on the pulse of technology, and share that knowledge with other people in the sector and our clients and prospects sort of alike.
We know that games companies are data driven. I mean, that is the way they are run, but they're also looking much, much more at the life cycle. They're looking at ways to keep their players coming and staying in the game. It's a matter of product. It's also a matter of engagement. Now, you've worked at both sides because you've worked with gaming and non-gaming apps, and I'm hearing a lot more about what they can learn from each other.
Everybody in the app world has a challenge with retention. Everybody has a challenge with driving higher engagement. And yes, you might be a travel app, and actually your level of engagement is once every 6 months when people come to book their summer holidays or winter holidays. Or you might be sort of hyper casual game where your level of engagement is, getting multiple sessions a day. It doesn't matter. That ultimately the end game is the same, to drive that level of engagement. And the techniques we use and the strategy we can use are adapted for each of those different markets, but they're sort of fundamentally underpinned by the same logic. Like, you're trying to get people to stay with you, to become engaged, and ultimately to get beyond that phase to become brand ambassadors who are super loyal to your brand and will generate referrals back in. So they sort of feed back into the acquisition side. All of this comes down to, data. So it's not very exciting, not very sexy, but, fundamentally you can have the best game in the world. If you are missing some obvious data points or challenges in the data, you're not necessarily going to have the retention, the conversion to monetization that you would want. An example of that actually is for, I'm sure they won't mind, this is going back many years, so Sonic Dash, for those of you that remember, when it was the game to play. We were working with their studio, trying to figure out why there was a problem, and they believed it was a problem with, I think, a day 3 retention issue. So there was something to do with the game and the mechanics of it, which meant after 3 days people got bored. When we started to delve into it, it wasn't actually a temporal matter. It was actually an event issue. And we found the event was at a particular time and a particular level where there was a massive drop-off. We looked into that. As it turns out, at that particular stage, there was a new requirement in the title that you had to press down to go under an object. Now, that hadn't happened until that point. However, that was causing a massive drop-off because people weren't aware. We went back and reviewed their tutorial and sort of shaped a couple of push notifications as well, just to remind people over the first couple of days, hey, don't forget, if you need to get under something, you press down here. And the day 3 retention, nearly doubled. It's just incredible. That was not a problem with the game. It wasn't a problem with game mechanics. It was an issue that we identified by looking at data that we fixed through using a customer engagement platform. So interesting, really, there to see how data and marketing actually help solve what otherwise would have been viewed as a game challenge. It's really something that I pride ourselves in, and our team, in that we know what makes a great game standard generic games onboarding strategy and how to drive that retention, that reactivation, that lapse prevention. But we also know how to improve stuff that's in there by leveraging techniques from other industries.
So, Mike, we've talked about your background. You've, of course, worked with multiple apps across multiple verticals. And in a way, it's your job to see around corners, not just for yourself as an expert, but also CMA as the company that you have founded and where you're CEO. So drawing from that and your discussions with clients and games makers, what is the one change coming next? So therefore, they have to change their strategic planning starting right now.
Good question. I think the big one that is happening is going to be the fragmentation of the store ecosystem and payments ecosystem. Obviously, there is a huge change coming in 2024 where Apple and Google will be stopped being a duopoly and essentially have their doors opened a little to new app stores on both devices. Now, You could argue you can already sideload on Google, but the reality is these will be official Play stores or official Android stores and official iOS stores, which won't require all of the weird menu accepts and the dodginess that happens with sideloading. So actually, it will be a real opportunity, I think, for new stores to come along, particularly in the game sector. I think you'll see some of the existing games distribution stores outside of the mobile ecosystem start to build ones for iOS and Android. That's going to be really interesting because it's going to mean that, unfortunately for developers, you've now not just got to worry about the Play Store and the App Store. You're now going to be looking at maybe 3, 4, 5, 6 different stores to get your Android and iOS builds out onto. So a bit more work, but it means from an ASO perspective, you're going to have to optimize across many more stores than you potentially are at the moment. So actually getting your ASO in-house before that happens is probably important now more than it ever has been.
Which is a great segue, because one of the reasons I brought you on was I saw that you were shortlisted for the App Promotion Summit Award and a new tool. And I'm the curious type. So I thought, okay, let me understand a little bit more about this, particularly because I think it was made with indie developers in mind.
So yeah, thank you very much for that. We're actually nominated as ASO Agency of the Year, so ConsultMyApp in there. So I'm super happy with that. And our software business, APPlyzer, has also been nominated as App Data Platform of the Year. Now, we bought APPlyzer about 3.5 years ago, and really we bought it to use internally. But over those years, we built out some amazing data models and tech, which would be almost selfish for us to just hold internally. So what we've done is we've sort of relaunched APPlyzer, which has been around since 2009, but we relaunched it with all of these new data models and sort of things like keyword relevancy scores. We have our own search traffic, search impressions, lots of wonderful stuff in there. And it's been launched at a price point which anyone should be able to afford. So it's only $35 a month, which is incredibly cheap if you compare, the existing incumbents, the app tweaks, the mobile actions, the data AIs. Indie developers, you need the core basic stuff. You want to be able to track, which search terms you're ranking for, how many search impressions are they generating, how are your competitors doing, what is your share of voice? And you don't want, if you're a match 3 and you are, a sort of a new entrant to the market, you might not consider someone like Royal Match or one of the biggies as a competitor. So actually, I want to look at my share of voice in amongst these small to mid-tier titles and publishers. So, having that share of voice allows you to measure yourself and benchmark yourself against the people that matter to you and focus on, these are the competitors I need to take traffic from. It has unlimited keywords in any country, any language. So it's not like you just get 10 keywords. You can add as many search terms as you like. You can use it to build your own keyword universe if you're new to ASO and you don't know where to start. It will identify new keyword opportunities for you. See how tough some of the keywords are, how competitive they are. You can use it to perform review analysis. You can even look at your products and say, actually, have I got particular issues with my my login screen or my purchase, or people redeeming some virtual coins in my game? And like I said, it's not there as a money making exercise. It's there to make this data available. And back to what I was trying to achieve with CMA as a business, I'm trying to bring everybody into the market. So it has a lot of real useful stuff for not just indie developers, but it is really targeted at sort of smaller developers. We do have licenses for some of our larger businesses that also use it. But, these sorts of things are incredibly valuable. And it's all about trying to, I'm going to use the word democratize again, ASO data. It shouldn't be only available to people that want to spend thousands of dollars a year. Because the reality is we built an infrastructure in a different way to any of the other data players that allows us to offer it at pretty much cost price to our customers.
You make a point, it's about the small and mid-sized. You got large companies as well. You have King. It is for the large companies as well, but it's for the ones that need a little bit of a boost, a little bit of a help in what's going to be challenging times, great opportunities to be in all the app stores. that will come, but also, huge responsibility to get it right. So it's not that easy. It's not cut and dried, because they're going to be looking for long tail keywords. They're going to be looking at niches, the opportunity in sub genres. And what I found interesting in reading about APPlyzer is that you can sort of listen in, you can sort of see the signals, read the signals of what's coming up. So not what is popular, but what is really about to bubble up from under the surface. Maybe you can walk me through that, how that works.
This is really cool. It is. It's something that we speak a lot to the larger publishers about. They're spending lots of money, but it is still applicable and very interesting to indie devs as well, and smaller publishing houses. And this is looking at near real-time data. So if for anybody that's used, the mobile actions, the data AIs, all of these guys, their models are either large. Well, a lot of them are largely based on Apple's search popularity score. And also, if you've used Apple's search popularity score, if you ever look at it, it's got a couple of limitations. So the first of which is possibly the most frustrating, is that it employs a weighted moving average. So you never get the intra-week variances on keywords. So I don't know that on a Monday a search term is really popular, and as a weekend it's not popular at all, but I just get an average middle value, because actually I can do a lot to adjust my in-app event strategy, my bidding strategy. So that is one problem. The second is that it's 48 hours lagged. And I assume this is a data processing challenge on Apple's side. So that means any of the search scores you're looking at for a keyword are 2 days old. I'll give you an example of the keyword jackpot. So we work with companies that run, things like social casinos. Jackpot's a really important term. It tends to go up and down in the US when Powerball is getting near $1 billion. What's really interesting is that you look at it on Apple's data, and it shows it peaking on a Monday evening, 2 days after the draw has already been won. And actually, if you look at it in our data in APPlyzer, you've got a real view. It shows it immediately dropping off. So these sort of the accuracy of the data is so important. I can't emphasize. It's the old sort of the mantra of garbage in is garbage out. If you don't have quality data in, your ASO strategy, your paid media strategy is never going to be great. If you're relying on inaccurate data, you're never going to be able to optimize your campaigns as efficiently as they should be. I would love to say that the amazing results our team generate are all because our team know everything in the world there is to know about Apple search ads or GAC. The reality is, yes, they do know a lot of stuff, but they've also got the advantage of having this data behind them. Having a look at how that data moves from day to day is really, really fascinating. So, for instance, a lot of TV shows now have second screen apps attached to them. And what you'll find is when they're on live, like Love Island or I'm a Celebrity, which I know in lots of different countries, but you'll find that when they're on and they're advertising and banging on about the app, the traffic on that peaks massively. You've actually got a real view of that, and we can provide hourly data, by the way, through our API access. You can actually see at any given time of the day how popular these terms are. And if you've got that data, you can create a proactive in-app event strategy around it, because I know between the hours of 7 and 10 p.m., this keyword is well worth targeting. So I'm going to create in-app events which are operational at that time. I'm going to tailor my custom product pages and custom store listings to have imagery which reflects that. I'm going to tailor my social media campaigns to start targeting those terms on that time, because I know I'm going to get far higher interest and volume of traffic. All of this stuff and all of this insight, we've spent the last 3 years building this data model, and it's just incredible. Go and try it. You literally just create an account on it now, and anyone can go and play with this for free. Look at NBA. You can see when the peaks are in the data and when it drops off, depending on what games are on. Are there any competitions? This sort of stuff for all sectors, but in particular sectors like games, sports, streaming, and gambling, they are super influenced by by these sort of transient terms. And that's something that, has never existed before. Getting that day to day, I mean, even the hour to hour view that, again, you can get access to the API, but the day to day view of the data is something that's never been seen, because we've taken a whole different approach to it, and made it sort of available to the clients. It's really, really cool. I could talk for hours and probably years about it, but having access to data that is accurate is, it's a no-brainer. So really, all of your paid and organic strategies should be based off that sort of data.
Without going too deeply into what you do, with all your different customers, but it would be interesting to understand what that uplift could be, like a range. I mean, there's a reason to tinker with an exciting toy like APPlyzer. What could a game dev look at as the value add?
Oh, that's a great question. I mean, uplifts depends on how optimized your setup is. To take it from a well-optimized setup to something that's world-leading, you might be talking 20 to 30% lift on a sort of monthly organic acquisition volume. But if it's something that hasn't really been focused on or optimized, you could be talking 2, 3, 4x improvements, maybe more, on your sort of monthly organic install volumes. And it can be, for some clients, we've had like 10 or 15x in the right market at the right time.
So we've talked about a tool that will get you where you need to go, because the whole idea is that we're in Q4. How do you end Q4 with a bang and carry that momentum into Q1 of 2024? So you've come with your checklist. It's almost like a late night show. We're going to start with number 1.
Number 1 for $50 is hunt for trends. Yeah, so trend hunting, that's something we spend a lot of time doing, and you should spend a lot of time doing. And this is looking at intraday, intra-week variances in search terms. Now, I talked about it a bit before, but just looking at averages is no good. Look at search terms and when they're popular. And they might be sporadic. You may find, like, in your massive keyword hunting universe, there are 1 or 2 terms which just pop up and shoot through the roof on certain days of the month. And it might be they're connected to events which happen on a monthly basis, like a marathon or a competition. But have a look for trends in there, because you don't want to be optimizing any of your metadata or imagery for items which are simply not popular at that given time of day, that day of the week, that week of the year. So I do focus a lot on the trends, not just seasonalities. We're not talking about longer term trends; they're super important. But look for things. Analyze all your data. Again, whack it in all the keyword universe. Look at the last 12 months of data and start to review that and see how it's performing. You'll find stuff in there that you wouldn't think ever would have existed. By doing that, you'll get an advantage over everyone else. So number 1, look at trends. Look at those intraday, those intra-week, week to week sort of patterns in the search data, and adapt both your organic, because now you can use in-app events and Google promo stuff. You can actually position those on an hour by hour basis. So ASO just being viewed as a once a release activity is out the window. So you can actually use that data organically as well as from a paid perspective to adjust your creatives for any given time of the day or day of the week. So I'd say that is number 1. The other piece that we really need to look at is autocompletes. So autocompletes change every day. Use a tool to show you every autocomplete every day. So if, for instance, you've got a Sudoku game, I would be looking at which Sudoku autocompletes in there. You'll get some weird things that turn up. I guarantee it. Every now and again, Apple and Google start to index strange autocompletes, which are like Sudoku #98.3b or something weird like that. The great thing about those is that people generally are lazy and they will just hit autocompletes. So if you actually index and put that #98.3b in an indexable field, maybe an in-app event, maybe your actual keyword field, and you can index for that and react very quickly, there's probably only you and 1 or 2 other titles that are going to index for it. So you're going to get and steal a lot of that traffic. So autocompletes are in there. And then there's sort of, a few other bits and pieces. So, look at categories and so forth that sort of fall under this. It's an interesting one. We're looking at all the puzzle games recently because I'm giving a talk at, or our team are giving a talk at a conference coming up soon, specifically on that. Puzzle games, only 30% of them only have one category set. They actually don't use a secondary category, which is a massive crying shame, because you can actually rank well, sometimes better in other categories than you can in your primaries. So use secondary categories for your games titles.
So there's a lot to unpack there, Mike, but there's a lot of value there as well, because puzzle games, massive category, and missing out on some opportunities there. And you did make the point as well, hunting for those trends, and some of that can even change hour to hour. So again, another reason to be looking at that data. But it's not just about the data. You have some other items on your checklist. So let's get to number 2.
Yeah, sure. So number 2, acquisition and engagement. For anyone that's seen me talk over the last year, the last 7 years, you'll probably have heard me talk about combining acquisition and engagement in order to achieve sustainable growth. What does that actually mean? That means influence your acquisition efforts, organically and paid, from the data you're getting post-acquisition. So if, for instance, you're finding a campaign isn't performing particularly well further down the funnel, then you might seem like an obvious thing to do. That's probably not a great campaign if it's not converting so well. But you need to feed that data back into your acquisition campaigns in order to essentially refine them. So it's really, really important that you do exchange the data, and it needs to happen both ways as well. So, feeding data in to influence your engagement strategy is super important. So, because if you acquire someone from, let's say, ASO organically, or from Apple search ads, versus someone you've acquired through a TikTok or a Meta ad, the chances are they're different types of player. One is a subjective, taking a punt on it. They just so happen to have seen an ad on Meta, or somebody said, yeah, that'd be quite interesting. And you go, I'll go and have a play of this game, see what it's like. I think I'll have the people that are looking for a Sudoku or crossword, a puzzle game, that have specifically typed it in, and that's what I'm looking for. It is so important to give them different paths to onboarding and tutorials. You should not treat acquisition sources all the same. So feed the acquisition data into whatever you've got for your customer engagement platform, whether you are using sort of a free tool or you're using one of the more expensive ones, doesn't matter. But you need to make sure that you have different journeys and different tutorials and onboarding for those people. So I would say that connection of the dots is so important, because if you don't do that, you'll never ever drive down your CPAs, and you'll never increase your retention and player engagement metrics. So do consider the two sets of data as one and feed them into a data warehouse somewhere.
Which brings me to number 3, because this is a very general piece of advice, but also a very actionable one. Tell us about it, Mike.
Yeah, so this is stack attack, my favorite term ever of all time. So attack the stack. Your stack is possibly as important, if not more important, than the people you employ there, because you could have the greatest people in the world working for you, but if you don't have the technology to support them and allow them, enable them to make informed decisions, then you may as well have chimpanzees on typewriters. It's so important that you got the right tech in there, and it starts with the basics of analytics. So product analytics for anybody is super important. I talked about the example before of the Sonic Dash, where we discovered it wasn't a temple, just a day 3 issue. It was actually an issue with a particular level in the game. But you'll only find that out if you've got the correct reports to look at funnel drop-off during the game. So, make sure you have an analytics package. It doesn't need to be a crazy expensive one either. It does get harder the cheaper you go. So if you stick with a GA or Google Analytics, it takes a lot more time to build the reports, particularly vertical specific reports. But, go on Stack Overflow, do a bit of Googling. Usually somebody somewhere is trying to create the report you're looking for, and, do a bit of learning that way. So you don't need to spend crazy amounts of money, but you do need to spend time on it, regardless of in which platform you got, whether it's an Amplitude or a Mixpanel or whether it's Google Analytics. Spend time on it. Because if you get that right, it'll make your life a lot easier when you're making decisions about what to do in terms of game mechanics or different levels or any new features. You'll be able to at least make a very relatively informed decision as to what is already working and what isn't. So I would say also from an engagement perspective, engagement in the game space isn't just about product UX, UI, and mechanics. It is very important that those are right, but there's lots of things you can do to move the levers from a CRM or what I say is a player engagement perspective, and that's by creating a cohesive push notification in-app message and potentially email sort of strategy. That they are really, really valuable in different ways. So push notifications can be really valuable to either drive re-engagement at very specific times. You must understand when their idle or golden moments are where you can get them back into the game if they haven't played for a while. Or sort of educational pieces if they're stuck and they've lapsed. You think it could be because they can't get past this point. But these channels are also incredibly valuable for reactivation. So when you've got to that stage and you've potentially lost them, you need to get them back in. So what can you do to incentivize them to come back and either reinstall or re-engage with that title? And that doesn't just stop with customer engagement platforms. It also involves things like retargeting on social and other paid channels. But your customer engagement platform, you can go as very expensive or you can go very cheap. But the reality is, if you get a decent push and in-app messaging strategy right, and this does not mean it's controlled by dev, so it has to be done externally by an external platform, because otherwise you've got to have a new product release every time you need to change the push notifications. So please try not to use local notifications. But external an external platform that is capable of managing this as a strategy doesn't have to cost the world, but I can guarantee you'll get 80% of the value out of just getting decent push and in-app messaging strategy right. So you don't have to go crazy. Just focus on those two channels. I would say the technology stack's super important. I've talked about the analytics and the customer engagement platform. Obviously, if you're running paid acquisition, you need an MMP in place, and ideally you'll have a data warehouse where it all funnels into. But the two core pieces you can't live without are analytics and customer engagement.
But there's some good news in there as well, because you can be scrappy, you can get some results, and that's really important because a lot of people, that's what they have going into 2024. There's no question. So to wrap it up, the final number 4 of the things you need to do in Q4, number 4, Mike, I'll give it to you.
Yeah, sure. So the final one, I hate coming back to ASO all the time, because I know some developers or publishers look at it and go, I'm not. ASO is super, super important, regardless of what your views are on it. It's free, assuming you don't pay an agency, but organic is free. If you've got a great organic presence on the web already, put in some smart banners, drive people that are landing on that page from an iOS or an Android device, drive them to install the app straight away from the Play Store or the App Store. These are free things you can do. You can look at real-time data, but it's for $30, $35 a month. Just go on APPlyzer. It's a shameless plug, but it's not much money to get access to real-time data where you can start to view those peaks and troughs, the trends. You can adapt your acquisition strategy. The one thing we do with some of the large publishers is something called time-based interest targeting, T-bits, and they use sort of the data from an API feed out of APPlyzer in order to adjust dynamically their creative assets depending on what particular search terms are trending or popular in the store at any given time. That is really cool. Probably only relevant if you're spending big bucks. These are the sorts of things that I think major games companies get excited about, because you haven't been able to do that before without that data. Also for indies and smaller devs, start looking at in-app events. You've got an almost infinite source of indexing options there. It's not just about promos for your games. It's also about using them for targeting search terms. There's so much you can do with in-app events and in-app event tracking as well. You can see what your competitors are targeting. These are sort of free things. Or look at backlinks. What backlinks have you got to your app on the Play Store? Google cares about that, and it actually impacts your ranking. There's loads of things that you can do for free that you don't necessarily need to pay a lot of money for an agency. These sorts of things, I'm sure it will spark all sorts of ideas in your mind, but there's some really, really exciting stuff there.
See, that's always good news for our audience. Free or moderately priced is good news, particularly in the times we're in. And you say yourself, go in, take a look around, get excited about what you find, and action on that. And speaking of excited, I have to say, Mike, you are one of the most excited guests we've ever had. I don't know how you keep this energy. It's early in the morning. Here we are recording. I have to ask you, coffee. In addition to coffee, what keeps you excited about the industry? How do you keep that energy going, and how do you stay on top of things?
Oh man, I love the fact that it never stops. There's no, I mean, it's a curse and it's a blessing as well at the same time. Like, it's a curse in that I'm forever having to read up and re-educate myself every day of the year. There's something new happens, or Apple changes, Google changes something. There's like some new frameworks or games developer kits. There's all sorts of interesting stuff. So it's I never ever stop learning, and I don't for 1 minute profess to be the greatest expert in the world on in games or fintech, but I know a lot about a lot. but that's what excites me. There's just so much change, and it's always fresh. You're always learning, and I think anybody in any job in any walk of life, just to keep learning is so important, so valuable. It motivates you, makes you want to get up in the day. If you're doing the same thing every day, it's a tough existence. The fact that I'm constantly learning is, for me, an absolutely wonderful industry to be in, and that's what gets me up in the day. Is the thought of learning some new stuff and applying it, like with these cool data and models and things. Like I love chatting to our data modelers. Like it's a real refreshing conversation. There's always something new they've found out, some little tweaks or hacks they've discovered. So for me, it's all about the fact that this is a dynamic industry.
We're all learning. We're all perfecting our craft, learning to be Jedis. And to your point, and I've been at so many conferences, from the game dev perspective, it's all about staying curious. So you ask them, what are the skills you need to be working in gaming? And they say, stay curious. So you've got it right there. So if you ever wanted to, go over to the other side, Mike, I think you've got a place there. I want to wrap it up the way we always do when Brian is here. He always asks the question. Now, I will as well. We ask about your gaming passion. So 2 questions to end with. What's your favorite game you're currently playing right now, in between all that learning and all that coffee? And what's your favorite game of all time?
Oh man, well, I've got a rubbish answer for the game I'm currently playing because I've just had a baby, so she's 4 months old now. So understandably, I haven't got too much time. Bizarrely, my favourite game is on a mobile device now. It's actually in my car. So when I'm sat waiting for baby to come out of the doctors, I get a lot of time sat in the car. So I started to play the little in-car games. There's one called 99 Balls, which I love. It's a simple trigonometry-based game. I mean, it is super monkey simple, but I love it. It's really addictive. I keep wanting to go back and play a bit when I'm sat in the car to see if I can get further and beat my high score. And it's probably not a game that most people have heard of, or maybe they have, but 99 Balls is just simple fun. It's a common concept that exists, I'm sure, in 1,000 different formats, but it really is the game I'm currently playing. I'm embarrassed to say it. I haven't got time to get into anything too much more serious. However, when I was younger, and I did have a lot of serious gaming time, it's got to be Unreal Tournament, one of the greatest first-person shooters ever that was invented. I played a lot of Quake, played a bit of Doom, but Unreal Tournament was the first one that made it awesome. And playing that online was on my 28.8K modem. Oh, boom, the lag on that was insane. But it was so much fun. I used to do rocket jumping, and I used to camp out. People hated me because I'd be sat there with a sniper rifle. And you could see when some people's... sometimes when the internet connections drop, you could see they would basically just be frozen and you'd just be able to kill them immediately. That was because they were also using a 14.4 baud modem, not a 28.8 like I was. And I eventually got into a 56K modem, which was glorious.
And I was just thinking, the other point is you're proving now, everything I'm reading, including in PG Biz, right, that we're going to be playing games in our cars. I've seen the ones, I think they're built into the BMW and others. So Here you go. It's going to be the next screen. You're proof of it.
It is, and this is, apps aren't just on an iPhone or an Android device. They're all over. So, when we work with clients, it's not just about, iPhone and Android. We're looking at all sorts of areas. Apps are pretty ubiquitous these days. Now, that's also what I'm excited about, is the fact that the app world is just exploding. There is an app for everything and an app almost everywhere you could imagine. And it means that we'll be very busy.
Indeed, indeed. Well, on that note, because I know you do have to go to some other calls, I just want to thank you, Mike, for being my guest here on PG.biz, and above all, for leaving us with some optimistic ideas to end the year, move into the next one. You know what? It's going to be golden. So thanks so much.
My pleasure. And if anyone actually knows of a place you can play Unreal Tournament still online, do drop me a line. I'd love to have a little WAN sesh.
You're on. We'll add it in the show notes. Thanks so much for sharing.
Cheers. Thanks.
This show is all about how to do your job better, how to make an amazing game, how to market it, and you have a say. So if you have a story or know someone we need to shine a light on, then we would love to hear from you.
We want to hear from you. We want to reflect the reality of the mobile games market in all its wonderful complexity and strangeness. So if you have any suggestions for us, if you have any feedback for us, you can always get in touch. You can email us at podcast@pocketgamer.biz. You can find us on Twitter @PGBiz, and you can reach out to us through the pocketgamer.biz website. If you're interested in listening to all of our podcasts, you can find them at pocketgamer.biz/podcast, and we would love to hear your thoughts on future shows.
And we've got you covered on all the major platforms, so subscribe to the audio podcast, as Brian said. Look for us on YouTube. If you want to read it, hey, you can do that too, because we have a companion post for you as well on the pocketgamer.biz website.
Tune in again for the next edition of the pocketgamer.biz podcast, and we look forward to speaking to you in the near future. Until then, I'm Brian Baglow.
I'm Peggy Ann Saltz, and that's a wrap until next week.